Hi, have you ever wondered why on so many different astrology channels, the most popular videos that get viewed are always the Scorpio ones? They're always the 8th house ones, always the Pluto videos. Why do we want to know so much about this subject? Why do we want to know so much about the 8th house and Scorpio and Pluto? Have you ever been curious yourself about why this subject is so popular? If you want to know why and know some of my thoughts, I guess, on why this is so popular, please continue to keep watching. So some of the things I want to cover in this video for sure is number one, why we are fascinated with the 8th house. Number two, how are 8th house placements in any kind of chart different from Scorpio placements. And lastly, I also want to cover what the 8th house might signify in synastry, if you might have a lot of 8th house overlays in your synastry. And please make sure you also stay tuned for a part 2 of this video. I'm going to have to split this subject into 2 videos because there's just so much to cover and so much I want to talk about, and in that second video you can expect to see some more further explanation on different planets in the 8th house that you might have, and as well as signs on the house cusp of your 8th house. So let's get started in this video. The first point that I want to talk about is, why do we want to know so much about the 8th house? 8th house represents the unknown, apparently, and what we can gain from others. And what does that include? Like, what do we really have to gain from others? That can include things like power and control and money and assets and their secrets, as well as sex. So those are just a few things that the 8th house might cover, and a few of those keywords you might see pop up very frequently when you do research on the 8th house. We love secrets. I think that people are really fascinated with the 8th house, first off because we're really fascinated by the unknown. We want to know more about people and psychology. Just like deeper human psychology is one of the highlights of the 8th house, and discovering more about your 8th house as well as other people's 8th house and seeing what planets are in them as well as what sign is on the 8th house is going to uncover really like what we are afraid of. What are the things that we keep there that we are sometimes afraid to face ourselves, as well as what we intentionally hide from other people. So of course we want to know like what other people are hiding from us. We want to know their secrets, we want to know the truth, and some of us, if we're really brave, might even want to know the hidden and more scarier truths about ourselves. And if that's you, and if you have ever looked up an 8th house video or researched the 8th house with that intent in mind, then good for you, you're really brave. And another reason I think that we really enjoy researching the 8th house is because it also has to do with sexual matters and intimacy. Again, that's just one of the many things that we might gain from a partnership. The 8th house is the second house from the 7th house. What is the 7th house? Are partnerships. The 8th house, which is right after it, is what we can gain from those partnerships. So that's something that you can remember as how to remember what the 8th house really signifies. The 8th house, sexual matters, right? Sex is an exchange. It is a lot deeper than just regular casual sex, if you want to call it that. And casual sex could be governed by the 5th house because it's about just pleasure, just sex for pleasure's sake. And the 8th house is so much more than that. It is really truly bonding with a partner. It is true intimacy and really sharing with each other, sharing your emotions, not just your bodies, but your emotions and your minds and your souls. And depending on what sign is on your 8th house, you may or may not understand that. And some signs on the 8th house can have that ability to separate the physical from the emotional, and that's just different styles of intimacy. But for sure, 8th house sex is very deep and it's not casual at all. So does that mean that since we are so into researching the 8th house, are we tired? Are we getting tired of casual intimacy? Or not really intimacy, but you know, casual sexual encounters? Are we trying to look for more meaning in our relationships? Are we looking for something more substantial, something more meaningful? And the last reason that I think we're so interested in the 8th house and learning about it is that it is known to be deep and dark and scary, and it explores the depths of people's minds and their lives. It's very mysterious, and who isn't interested in mystery? Who isn't turned on by that? And I know that a lot of horror fans are also going to be really interested in learning about the 8th house because it encompasses those things. It's so hidden, it's so mysterious, and you know, it's your inner darkness. And some people are interested in exploring that. Some people are not scared of that. Most people are, but people who just want more in life, I guess, just more depth, more meaning, and they're tired of the superficial and just keeping things lighthearted and surface, then you're probably somebody who is interested in the 8th house and somebody who will definitely not hesitate to click on a video that is themed about the 8th house. Alright, so part 2 of this video is going to cover how 8th house planets are different from Scorpio planets, because they are different. Sometimes you'll see different astrology sources using Scorpio and the 8th house as interchangeable terms, but they're actually not. They're different because the sign is all about how we handle the affairs of the house, and the house is the area of life. So how is it different? We are putting our energy, aka planets, into the 8th house, towards 8th house themes. And so we're concerning and we're linking the planetary associations with the 8th house and putting that planet within the context of the 8th house. It's not just about behaving in a Scorpio-like way or having like Scorpio traits assigned to that planet. It's different. In my opinion, Scorpio planets or placements are more obvious than planets that are in the 8th house, because the 8th house it's hidden and it's not something that we just, you know, display readily on the surface like the 1st house or the 10th house. It's the 8th house and it's all about mystery, and sometimes the things that are in that 8th house are hidden from our own selves, and it's up to us to really explore them, explore that part of us that is deeper and darker and scarier, and we don't always want to acknowledge it, right? So 8th house planets are harder to detect than Scorpio planets on the surface. And we can also put energy towards 8th house themes in different ways. So that's another way that it does differ from just having Scorpio planets, because we could have a planet in the 8th house, but it is in Libra or it is in Leo. So we're going to be pursuing 8th house themes in a Libra way or in a Leo way. That makes it very different from having the planet in Scorpio, because again, the sign describes how we are pursuing those 8th house themes. Now going on to the third part of this video, which is all about the 8th house and Synastry. 8th house and Synastry is also one of those really hot topics in the community that a lot of people really want to learn about, and a lot of people really want to just know and collect as much information as possible in Synastry, because a lot of people want to know about compatibility and how my planets line up with my crush's planets or my partner's planets. So the 8th house in Synastry is kind of infamous for being one of those, like, known for at least being one of those like fated or karmic connections in Synastry. And so having a lot of 8th house planets in your Synastry or in your overlays, which I may do a video on if you're not sure how to look up your Synastry or how to go about like laying your chart on top of your partner's chart and seeing where the planets line up or fall in each other's houses. I am going to do a video on that very soon, so that you can be informed about how to really look more deeper into astrological compatibility beyond zodiac signs, beyond sun signs. Okay, so I think that is a really important tool to know how to do, especially when you're starting out. But if you're familiar with how to look up synastry and how to compare charts, then you're probably familiar with just the fact that 8th house synastry is super popular and super just intensely researched. And if you have any of your planets or your partner's planets falling into your 8th house, or your planets are falling into their 8th house, either way, there is definitely going to be a strong psychological or even psychic connection between you. And it's just going to be whatever you want to call it. You know, it's going to be an unspoken connection, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, or whether you've realized it or not. You do have that connection, and it's not something you can hear through words, not something you can see visibly before you in a physical or tangible way. It's unspoken, and it's a connection that you're going to have to like read between the lines in order to really understand it, or to really sense its presence, sense that connection. It's definitely an indicator of chemistry, of a really just strong magnetic pull towards each other. And that can be good or bad. It just also has to do with having extreme feelings for one another, whether that be extreme love and attachment and a soul connection, or it could be extreme hatred. You know, it can easily flip-flop from one day to the next. So it can easily lead from really being infatuated with this person to, like, you know, one thing that they do that just sets you off, and it just leads you into the complete opposite direction, into just hating them the next day. And then the next day you're like in love with them again. But for some reason, if you have an 8th house connection with somebody, especially if their planets fall into your 8th house, it's almost like you never forget anything that they've said to you, whether it's good or bad. And so it's a little bit hard for you to, as the 8th house person, to really let go of anything that they do, or whether they stay in your life or they don't. You're always going to hold on. And there's always just going to be a little part of you that is always with them, or that they seem to have taken with them wherever they went, whether they went next door or they just left your life completely. If your planets are in their 8th house, you will feel possessed by them. It's your energy that is being encapsulated, encompassed, and just basically engulfed by their 8th house. That is what the 8th house does. It engulfs the energy, whatever energy is being put into it, whether it's your planet or the transiting planet. It just swallows it whole, and it becomes obsessed with it. We might feel, when our planets are in their 8th house, that we are constantly being watched, that we're under surveillance, that they have possibly called the FBI on us, and we have no idea that they are actually watching us through our webcams right now. It just feels like that. It just feels like we are being possessed, like we are just controlled somehow, and we might have a feeling of a sense of powerlessness when we're with them, like they just want to control things all the time. And depending on who you are, I guess some people like that and some people don't. And if it's their planets into our 8th house, we are the ones who are obsessed. We are the ones who can't get our minds off of that person. We can't stop thinking about them for some reason, and this can occur between any kind of relationship. All right, so it doesn't necessarily have to be romantic, it doesn't have to be sexual, it could just be anybody. And for some reason you are constantly worrying or stressing or just ruminating over what they think about you or how they perceive you, you know. So we might be obsessed with them in that way, and just, you know, depending on other factors, it could be obsessed with earning their approval. It could be obsessed with just learning about them as a person, you know, trying to emulate what they do because maybe we admire them. You know, in synastry, the 8th house represents an exchange for sure. It is an exchange, and an exchange in which transformation is a result. that is some powerful stuff. That is some intense, crazy stuff. I think that's another reason why we're so into 8th house synastry, because we want to know how we're going to be transformed, how we are going to change as people from the inside out because of this person, because of what they do, because of their effect on us, and how they have left us. They have come into our lives and just sort of left us in a state of obsession, in a state of just being mind boggled, just probably even confusion. And we just want to know where it goes. You know, are we going to be transformed for the worse or for the better? And so that can lead us into just thinking and just wondering, you know, learning about this person and learning about 8th house and synastry. And it's also partly, again, it's also partly about your sex life. It's not going to be everything about your sex life. Like, you can other things in the chart can indicate certain things about your sex life with this person, but with the 8th house, it's really all about the intimacy and really all about the deeper, more meaningful exchanges you might have with this person. And that also includes sex and intimacy. It's shared intimacy. So of course we're interested in that. Of course we want to learn about that and see how like compatible we are in that area. And if somebody's any type of overlay you might have with a person, there's going to be that boost, if you want to call it that, in your intimate relationship with that person, if you have any kind of intimacy with that person. You definitely want to look for the sun, the moon, Venus, Mars, probably Lilith too, Eros, in the 8th house when you're looking at synastry overlays. Okay, so that wraps up my first part video of the 8th house in astrology, and I hope it did answer some of your questions that maybe you were also wondering. I hope you were, because I don't think I'm the only person curious about why we like 8th house stuff so much. So yeah, I hope that answers your questions, and if you have any more, make sure you comment down below if you are unsure about something or if you just want any clarification on something in this video. And I'm curious to know, what planets do you have in your 8th house? What sign is on your 8th house cusp? And how do you honestly, like, if you want to share, how do you feel about the 8th house and just subjects surrounding the 8th house? And if you do have any planets there or any like special connection you might feel with your own 8th house, please give this video a like. And also like this video if you found it informative at all. Please make sure you subscribe if you are new to astrology, or if you just want to learn more about astrology and have an open mind towards it. I try to make videos that are easy to understand and are not just informative but easy to understand, especially if you are new, and I try to make it as interesting as possible. At least that's what I'm trying to do from now on. So yeah, I'm making a few changes to my channel and sticking to my schedule a lot more strict and a lot more committed now. So I hope you stay for that, and I hope you stay to see my growth. I'm still a very small channel at the moment, and I'm hoping to reach my next goal as soon as possible. So if you can subscribe and turn on notifications and show your support in that way, that would mean so much to me. And I will see you again soon for another video very soon. Thanks for watching.